So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Paul Chatterton of Leeds University in Lilac, who's going to give the keynote address on our first theme of community. Paul is Professor of Urban Futures at the University of Leeds and has been a very active academic, advocating for all manner of different and radical ways of addressing housing problems. Paul's published many peer-reviewed articles and written 10 books. And in fact, your latest book, Paul, we've got a limited number of copies available and we're going to put them on sale later in the day. So watch this space for announcements about how you can buy your copy of Paul's latest book, which I haven't read yet, but I'm sure it'll be a great read. So I'm going to leave it there, Paul, for you to say whatever else you want to say about yourself by way of introduction.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks very much. Thank you. And it's a delight to be here again, and hopefully I can be as on script and on message as the Housing Minister. So thanks for that wonderful prelude, and it's wonderful to be here again. Some of you might have been here hands up, who was at last year's conference? So there's a few of you. So I have changed my pitch this year, but it's wonderful to be invited back to address an audience who is so keen to frame housing within this radical framework. So I'm delighted that the Agile team is framing it in that way. So and also hi to my Leeds University colleagues and students who are here today. So it's great to have that engagement of early career researchers and young people coming through who need to land these ideas on the ground, right, over the coming decades. Okay, so listen, Agile team, I've taken the radical word seriously, right? Today I'm a radical in the sense of I do believe in deep social and political transformation in my lifetime. Yeah, so that's what radical means to me. Remember, it also has a deeper meaning in terms of its Latin roots. Literally, radical to go back to the roots, to go back to the foundation of what we're trying to tackle. Yeah, so like going back to the foundation is really important in terms of our housing. Yeah, and as Linda intimated, we live in a deeply turbulent world. Yeah, so I think what I want to do today is dedicate this talk to all those people this year and in the coming years who are going to have problems accessing housing, who will not have a house, will not have somewhere called home, who through war, displacement, invasion, climate disruption, climate breakdown to urban systems, be it energy, food, water, yeah, don't have somewhere called home. And this is a growing and growing global phenomena, right? Both in our country and abroad. And I think this is one of the key things we need to address, the instability of that very important thing we call a home. And how we address that through a radical agenda for housing is one of the most important things of our time. Because we're not just talking about straw, bricks and timber, however you build your house. We're talking about building communities, yeah? Building a place where we can be safe. And I think that key metaphor of safety is so important. And that's why I want to pitch this today to you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can be a housing radical, yeah, in these emergency times. What does it mean to live in a period which seems riven by emergencies, yeah? And how do we respond on our patch? Because rather than my pitch today is rather than leaving this to emergency services or the big state. Right, so in the last few parliaments, we've had everything from big society to levelling up. So we've had various metaphors about how the state can reconfigure itself. How do we all feel empowered to get involved in it feels like these converging and accelerating emergencies, yeah? Be it militarization, be it climate breakdown, be it ecological loss, be it mass social inequality, yeah, be it political disenfranchisement. All these are converging and accelerating. And it almost feels like there's a bit of a ratchet mechanism coming. If I keep coming back year and year to conferences, it's like, what more do we say to get into this emergency mode? Because we keep coming back to conferences and the world around us keeps fragmenting. So I think we need to align ourselves to that changing situation. Okay. Greta always comes out with wise words, but remember those words back in 2018? I want you to act as if your house is on fire, okay? Relevant metaphor for us, right? The whole street is now on fire, yeah, if we want to extend the metaphor. You know, the whole neighborhood is ablaze, okay? if we're going into emergency mode, it feels like we're fully in emergency mode, even though there's not a visible emergency out there. There's some serious coming apart of the social systems, institutions and organizations which hold us together. Yeah, and I think we need to take that seriously because they deliver what we call provisioning systems which keep us safe. Yeah, be it water, housing, food, energy, those basic services which keep us safe are coming apart. And it's really, really important to understand that and what safety means at a local level. So what would it mean, though, to get into emergency mode? Okay, to act as a housing radical if we're going to take the conference theme seriously. I'm working with an illustrator called James McKay. He's done some brilliant cartoons for me, so they're featuring this talk today. So thanks to James McKay. He does these wonderful illustrations of a low-carbon future. So look, the United Nations, very conservative global scientists, keep putting out these adjectives: immediate, rapid, large-scale, unprecedented, far-reaching. They're running out of ways to describe what we're up against. Yeah? They're running out of ways to describe the kinds of transformations we need to embark upon every day, right now. So this is what getting into emergency mode means. Taking these words seriously. What would it mean for us for us in our daily lives? Everyone, be you an architect, a planner, a community organizer, a care worker, to take immediate, rapid, large-scale, unprecedented, and far-reaching change in our daily lives. Yeah. But let's take a close look at the idea of emergency, because a state of emergency, it can create panic, powerlessness, confusion. It can involve disruption to life and safety. So this is not a word to be used lightly. But we can use it to get us into emergency mode in a new way, right? How do we tackle these converging emergencies in a way that empowers us, brings us together, creates new forms of relationships between people and new forms of organizations in our towns and cities, which can both recognize the scale of the challenge and do good things to make those challenges less severe in our daily lives. I want to pitch to you this idea of emergency first responders, and that's what we all can become, right? We're not quite first on the scene because we've all been here for many years, but rather than feeling powerless and panic, we can start to link small and large scale actions, some of the bigger stuff happening there and what we can do on the ground, some more short and longer term changes. We can focus on system change. When I say that, it's taking some of the conference themes and thinking, how can I change land and finance and community relationships and how we organise ourselves together? How can we think holistically about all the different types of things we need to change rather than working in traditional silos, like I only work in this sector, I'm only talking about food, I'm only talking about land, I'm only talking about housing, I'm only talking about transport. How do we start to link those together and see how they start to transform the way our city councils and governments and regional governments work in terms of connecting those different themes? Now, what I suggest is that this is the key for me about who housing radicals are. If we've come to this conference because you see yourself as a housing radical, you want to be a housing radical, here's my contention: that we need to create local breakaway coalitions, of these first responders, right? So there's people working in local authorities, there's people working in business, there's people working in universities, there's civic leaders, third sector leaders, They all work in partnership in traditional ways. Now, the key thing is they need to start working in that same combination, but in new ways. They see themselves as breakaway actors. They need to go to their jobs and say, look, I'm not just going to do the same as I always do. I can't just keep reproducing the same policies, the same relationships, the same organisational strategies, which I've always done. I'm going to get together with other breakaway actors in my locality and start a new dynamic. That, for me, is the secret to change. This is not an activist. This is not an activist route. This is joined up between those different sectors. This breakaway coalition who can start to enact. These are the housing radicals. These are the people who know how to talk to big business, know how to talk to community leaders, know how to talk to third sector partners, know how to have dialogue with policymakers and decision makers, know how to talk to politicians, know how to talk to the public. So 10 reasons why we need this emergency action, right? Just to reinforce some key messages, and therefore why we need this breakaway coalition of housing radicals. I'm just going to whistle through these because I think many of you will know them, but let's foreground them, yeah, for these 2 days. First big one, of course, our housing is driving climate breakdown. The way we make housing, the way we live in housing, right, is accumulating vast amounts of carbon in our atmosphere, globally and locally, right? Housing is around a third of all carbon emissions in the UK, from the materials we use, from the way we heat our homes, right, from the poor insulation. And, just hit, this graph that I did really brings it home. Now, this is for Leeds, but if we want to do it for Bristol, the figures are about half, right? So we can do it for Bristol, no problem. Right, so everyone's talking about net zero. Stop talking about net zero. We must only talk about carbon budgets because it's super important. Net zero is an endpoint, confuses. Carbon budget is what you're in and how much you've got left to spend in your wallet, right? It's immediate and it's really important. Every single person needs to stop talking about net zero from today and only talk about carbon budgets. Now, Leeds is a population city of 800,000 people. We've got, if you take the whole world's carbon budget, you can divide up how much carbon each locality has to spend according to that, the whole carbon budget, how big their bit is of the whole global carbon budget. And that carbon budget is a particular size to keep us to that safe global temperature increase of 1.5 degrees. So scientists have figured this out, yeah? Our bit in Leeds, it's 40 million tonnes, right, to keep a safe limit of 1.5 degrees. Now, in Leeds, we emit 4 million tonnes of carbon a year. Now, to get to zero by the 2050s, we've got to get onto a descent curve that looks a little bit like that. So every year, you see the massive decreases in carbon we've got to embark upon, yeah, so we get to 2050 safely. So we get to 2050s in a safe way. If we stayed on that business as usual line up there, what would happen is that in about 8 or 9 years, we would fall off the edge of a carbon cliff where we'd have to go from 1 year emitting 4 million tonnes, or in case of Bristol, 2 million tonnes, because it's about half, so the next year emitting 0, right? Boom, it's a cliff. So you would plan more sustainably. Now the point is, we're not off that business as usual line. We're still on the business as usual line. We're not on the safe descent line. And this is all the carbon we need to stop emitting. I mean, we all came here today up to Frenchay. We know that the urban transport system in Bristol is abysmal. The housing stock is abysmal. All these massive challenges, these underfunded, under-organised challenges that localities face, through no fault probably of the locality themselves, but funding, national strategy, all those kinds of things. It's a complete absence. This is why we're not getting into emergency mode, because we don't understand that kind of thing, and we get complete smoke and mirrors from government strategy, and city councils absolutely terrified to have a proper dialogue with their citizens about the local challenge, right? So the carbon challenge is absolutely massive, and it comes from the way we live our lives, yeah? It comes from the way we're structured into this, no fault of our own, not of our making, largely, but we're stuck in a particular way of life. It's a high carbon way of life. This is the really big one. And it's super important to foreground the emergency nature of getting off that business as usual line and what it means if every locality across the planet doesn't do that, right, within the next 10 years. Absolutely terrifying, yeah? Okay, so move on. Our housing is driving habitat loss, yeah? We know that, natural species, plant animal species, being stripped out of our housing, literally assets stripped out of our housing, nothing left. Our housing is unaffordable. We're going to be hearing a lot about that, but the differential between annual salaries and average house prices is just widening and widening. Not from Britain, but you can find similar pictures to this in UK towns and cities. Our housing drives social isolation and geographical divisions. And this is going to get more and more, right, as social structures break down. Yeah, people become more nervous about the people they're living with and retreat back to neighbourhoods they feel safe in. And housing creates precarious lives. We know those precarious lives. Many people in this room today work in these sectors and have lived experience of what it's like. to support people in those sectors. Our housing's not healthy, and people at Agile are doing great stuff in terms of like what is a healthy house, right? In terms of all the chemical compounds and the materials that we should build our homes from. Housing reinforces corporate power. We're going to hear a lot about new building methodologies. There was a lot from Keir Starmer yesterday about new towns, labour towns, and grey land, that kind of stuff. But is it embedded in a new building methodology to deal with this kind of stuff? Because if it's the same delivery methodology, it's the same social, ecological, and climate disaster that we've had for decades, right? We need a new building methodology to avoid land banks and to avoid all the contracts going to these big guys and girls, right? And housing is increasingly privatised. We know that housing privatised stock by right to buy to let, and it's that undermining that relationship between people and their property. Housing creates non-places, whether it's suburban, whether it's city centre retail. I mean, take a walk around Bristol or Leeds, you see the kinds of city centre apartments going up in non-places. And, this actually must be stopped because these are the stock which will be with us for many. 5 minutes there might be more like 6 minutes. Yeah. Building more won't fix it, yeah? So we need a different building methodology, right? So we can't, just committing to bigger and bigger targets will not solve the problem. Okay, to the rescue, our housing radicals. So who are they? So look, who are these housing radicals? I want to break it down into different people so you can maybe find yourself in this room, because every single one of you in this room is a housing radical, right? So who are they, right? So let's have a look at a few kind of typical people who you might want to start to relate to and say, those people can become housing radicals. Okay, look, the researcher, the scientist, they're the housing radicals, creating the experimental city, new products and technologies coming onto the market to completely transform the way housing works. And that's what we need front and centre, these kind of innovation spaces, rolling out new low-carbon building methodologies and technologies. The teacher educator, we need people on the ground relearning community, building community relationships, training people how to set up cooperatives and managing common assets communally, right? It's a massive skill set. The entrepreneur, we need people who are building community-led structures, setting up community-owned finance initiatives, those kinds of skills, building what we call the new economy, right? Those new community finance skills of community share offers, of community land trusts. The city maker, we need the interconnected practitioner, we need departmental heads and mayors and city leaders who are going to say, I'm going to completely reconfigure my departmental structure. So housing speaks to transport, and transport speaks to food, and housing speaks to well-being, right, and health. And we're going to reconfigure how we make decisions. We need the social activist who's doing everyday activism, right? The Just Stop Oil thing is fine and it's going to do its own thing, but we need to be everyday activists, organising in our communities, holding those workshops in town and village and church halls, right? Organising and telling stories of how power comes about and how things are and how they could be different, yeah? So more than anything, the social activist is a storyteller about how things can be different. What I call the prosumer, the producer and the consumer shoved together, linking buying and making. How do we create communities, right, where people live and work, where people buy and sell and trade at a local level, creating a strong local economy? Think about communities as leaky buckets that drip out of the bottom. How do we stop the wealth draining out of communities? And the citizen, managing the urban commons, right? This idea of the commons, common assets, which sit between public and private. How do we manage those commons together? Yeah, because managing those common assets are the key to the future, the key to unlocking some of the climate resilient solutions that we're going to need. Big business, the Emergency Response Corporation, we will need big business, they're not going anywhere soon. We need the resources, the investment of big business harnessed towards these emergency practices, right? And it's about us and them getting together in that dialogue about how they can change their business practices. Look at Faith in Nature, look at Patagonia, transforming the way they do business. Imagine if every multinational put a seat at the table like Faith in Nature did for nature. Imagine if Barrett and Taylor Redrow, all those big guys, Persimmons, put a seat in their boardroom for nature, right? And said, okay, we're going to ask the natural environment every time we make a decision about the outcome of our development. And then the non-human, putting the non-human into this, right? 2 minutes, great. Putting the non-human into this. What if we started to reconfigure how we did housing with nature at the centre of this? Because if anything, we're a species in an interconnected web with other species. Our very survival depends upon that interrelationship. And if we don't figure that out soon, this apex species, as we are, will not have much longer on this planet at the size and scale that we have at the moment. Okay, so finally, this is all about emergency placemaking, right? 3 key priorities: resilience, safety, equality. You know, we need to build in those resilient structures to withhold shocks, but to stop those shocks coming in the first place. Safety is such a key one. How do we create safe spaces, yeah? How do we create places where we're fundamentally safe? Safety of tenure, safety from oppression, safety in terms of affordability, safety to travel, all the key safeties in our lives, yeah? And then equality, you know, equality in terms of access, equality in terms of representation. So, what does this mean for our conference themes? Well, I've done all 3, Craig and Linda, so I thought I'd drift into all of them. So there's a whole bunch of things we could say here. Look, for community, we need a new Community Powers Act. Some great momentum building there in terms of, you know, having a serious Community Powers Act. Neighbourhood assemblies participate with budgets to decide priorities, right? So that could really galvanise decisions at a local level. National community-led housing colleges and apprenticeships, because that's what we need. We need to reclaim those local building colleges, because all they're doing at the moment is servicing the big 5, right? Volume builders. We need them to service our movement. Land, we need experimental sites, community-led R&D on thousands, if not millions, of small experimental sites which can deliver at scale. We need new public-community partnerships to own and manage common assets, not public-private partnerships. We need new controls on land banking and corporate monopolies. We need a government-backed bank for cooperatives and community-owned vehicles, right? Because they can't get off the ground without that government support. We need discounts and incentives for biodiversity gain and social value activities. You know, major development loan discounts for those people that are going to deliver those ecological and social value benefits. And preferential land and finance for community-led organisations. You know, local authorities need to have a new statutory responsibility to give those preferential discounts. So this is where I live, Lilac Grove. This is where a lot of it's come from. Check out our website. It's a kind of a laboratory for housing innovation. 20 home straw bale housing in West Leeds. We have this mutual home ownership model, which delivers permanently affordable housing, decommodifies, is very democratic. There's 20 homes, there's 50 adults. It's a cooperative. We've been around for 10 years now, just had our 10th birthday, which is great. You know, we're there as a marker. We've done lots of stuff. We've created a little movement in Leeds. There's now Chaco, Chapeltown co-housing, there's Frontline, there's a whole bunch of communities emerging across Bristol, Leeds, Manchester. This community housing movement is gaining momentum now. It needs to gain more momentum so it can prove to statutory authorities it can deliver at scale and be part of that 1.5 million housing challenge, right? And you know, Rich has been doing great stuff with his report and getting this message out that it can deliver at scale, it can be the solution, it can create so many co-benefits. And here's just some from Lilac. You know, if every UK home were like a Lilac home, every year the UK would save, look at this, I mean, 42% reduction in the UK's total greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, crikey, it's eye-watering. I mean, it's water savings, the travel savings, the carbon savings, if we just could lock in the co-benefits of this amazing model at scale. So look, it's 2030. Fast forward, you know, think about this, you know, what's happened? Did we make it? What does it feel like? Put yourselves in 2030. What happened, right? How did it turn out? And backcast. Think, you know, what are the things I now need to do? You know, 2029, 2028, 2027, back to here. What are the things that happened in those years to get to that place that you that you believe in, that you want to see? So we're not at the 10th anniversary conference at the Radical Housing Conference saying the same thing and, you know, we didn't quite get there, yeah? But what are the things we can do now to make this real? Okay, so this is the book that will be around later, and that's the website, How to Save the City, and do follow me on Twitter, X or whatever it's called. I'm kind of losing the momentum for that, but let's keep going with it anyway. But the new book's out, website's out. I want to use it to create a dialogue with policymakers, with business leaders, with civic leaders, with other breakaway academics who are not just going to reproduce at neoliberal university. You know, we can reclaim this. We have the organisations, the capacities, the resources to do this. And look at us all in the room. So thank you. I'm going to stop there and pass back. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for an amazing introduction, and thank you also for immediately weaving together the themes that we're addressing over these 2 days. I think every speaker will be addressing in different ways more than the theme that they're headlined under. So we do want to encourage everybody to be thinking about both the themes individually and collectively.